Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Brad Brooks. Looking forward to our conversation today, Brad.
Me too. Me too, Simon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, thriving. What does thriving mean to you, Brad?
Well, thriving, I mean, if you think about the opposite, or maybe a little lesser scale of thriving is just surviving, which means just getting by. Um, and I don't think we're created to just survive. I think we're created to thrive, which means to almost like to blossom, to do well. And so I think in the context of what you're doing and what I do every day, we want the kids we work with to not just survive, we want them to thrive,
Yeah.
grow, to blossom, so to speak. So let's go with that one. If you're
Yeah.
thriving, then you're kind of
Yeah.
blossoming.
Blossoming. And I like the phrase, I like the word blossom. For me, it implies natural and nature, right?
Right.
The the flower. What does the flower need to blossom? It needs some sunlight.
Right.
It needs a bit of rain, but it's within its essence to do that. It doesn't require that. Well, a flower doesn't require any thought, does it?
Yeah.
It's what do they call it? A non sentient being.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and the next thing that pops up to me on that is I think you guys call it blacktop. So it's the material that roads are made out of.
That's
Is
right.
that right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
blacktop. So we call that over here in the UK, we call that tarmac.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's named after a bloke, a Scottish guy, I think, called McAdam. And he came up with this idea of tarmac, something. I don't know. I don't know where it came from. Um, but as a kid, I remember seeing. Um, I remember seeing a tiny little daisy, I think it was, and it had forced its way through a level of blacktop. And I thought, how can that be? How can that the power of that daisy's nature be strong enough to burst through something that's so big and chunky
Yeah.
uh, and heavy?
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how thick blacktop is, but like 4 inches, 6 inches, or something like that. So it's got a lot of weight on it, and somehow the flour forced its way through that
Yeah.
that way,
It's pretty determined. Yeah.
predetermined. Yeah, which is a nice metaphor for trauma, I guess, is it?
Yeah. You're determined. I mean, you gotta, like with Thrive, I mean, you got to it requires some work on your part. You have to be determined to to just like the plant you're referring at, to
Yeah,
get through the crack of the tarmac or the asphalt, whatever words you want to use. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So that's an inner thing, right?
Sure.
That's coming from within the flower. And that's coming from within the flower, and the flower is I don't know how far we're stretching this metaphor, right? Um, there's the internal driver, and then the environment to thrive.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking about it from your perspective, creating the environment for the kids to thrive.
Well, and I think too, I mean, Simon, we can carry the metaphor. It's really good. I mean, because you think about tarmac or asphalt on top of grass. I mean, the deck is so stacked against this flower. Um, and really, it's not given much of a chance at all. And yeah, the kids that I have seen come through our program over the years, I mean, that's one of the things I've said to our staff over and over again is the deck is stacked against them in a significant way. And we've got to do our best to try to level the playing field if we can. And I'm not talking like through, some sort of government intervention. I'm talking about as a staff, to try to really pour into them and not give up on them. Because in so many ways, they're just waiting for someone to give up on them because that's what's happened their whole lives. They've just had they had person after person after person, especially adults and authority figures in their lives. They've just given up on them. And so that's what they're waiting. But this flower, again, the deck totally stacked against it, completely covered. And it just needed something to kind of a little bit of a crack in the surface, something to believe in it, and it blossomed.
Yeah. So let's take that first the first idea that comes to mind listening to talk about the in depth and about the kids is that we've got an audience here that are listening that are probably not kids, right? Not I don't think many kids uh, tune into the Thriving Adoptees podcast. In fact, I know that most of the listeners, I think something like 80% are over 40.
Okay.
Um, so what have you learned? What have you learned that you could share with those listeners that are over that age? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, the research shows the more adults that can be in a child's life who have a really positive impact on their life, the higher their chances are for success. Now, how do you define success? I don't know. I mean, we're not into defining those terms, but I think we have a general idea of what success does not look like. And it's, whether it's incarceration or drug use or whatever, we would say that's you're not a successful person, or your life has not led up to that point if you're participate in those things. And then there are measures for success. If you're working on your education, you've got a job, you're contributing to society and all those things. And so the more and the more adults you have in a child's life that can really pour into that child, the greater their chances are to be successful. And we've seen that time and time again. Um, and it's not to say it's easy. Uh, um, we got there's a kid we've been working with in our program for over 4 years now, and he's a knucklehead. And the number of times he's been in my office and we've just talked through some of the really, really questionable decisions that he's made. And he's making one right now. He's in the middle of one, but we're still there. And the key with this one is he's coming back to us. He hadn't just given up and said, "Oh, these guys don't care about me anymore because I'm making this dumb mistake." He's coming back to us time and time again, and we're here, and he knows that. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, Simon, but
Yeah, it does. It does. If I just take it a little bit further, um, so it's about learning. Like it's about the depth to which we learn something. So we're talking to an adult audience here. I guess the adult audience is somehow thinking there's still more for me to learn. Right? I'm not living my best life to put it in simple terms. So, I must be missing something here. So I must be there must be something. There must be part of the jigsaw missing that I haven't yet found yet. And maybe the Thriving Adoptees podcast will help me get that. Maybe it will give me the a different learning, a new learning, or it might give me the same learning at a different level. Because what's if we keep on making the same mistakes until the lesson is kind of embodied within us? Is that like we can get a new idea as a theory in our heads? So we can have like a change of mind, right? But then we've got a change of heart, a change in the way that we feel about something. Um, So you can have a change of mind, a change in heart, or a change of life, like something really huge and big. So it's the same learning at a cellular level rather than a nice idea. Um, so I'm thinking about giving up smoking, right? For example. So people that they think it's a good idea to give up smoking, but they haven't had a big enough realization. And I was in that camp, right? I was in that camp. I knew that I should give up smoking, but I hadn't yet seen that clearly enough to do differently. So yeah. So I think it's about us seeing better because seeing the same idea or the same plan of action at a different level for ourselves, because it's very different. You raising helping a kid that's within your care and the adults listening. But for me, it's about insight. Insights are what change our worlds, but profound insights that we get in our bones. So we don't get it just in our heart, in our heads. We don't just get it in our hearts. We get it in our bones. And when we get that in our bones, then the world changes for us.
Sure. Uh, yeah. No, I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. And I think, I think what I hear you asking is, how can we as adults, if the audience here is, 80% over 40, which is me, I'm 46, and I've been doing this a long time, and here's what doesn't work is bull crap. I mean, it just doesn't, and I learned that the hard way. And you've got to be authentic. These kids can sniff you out a mile away if you're not being your authentic self. And here's one of the struggles I've had, Simon, and I think this will resonate with some of your listeners. Is I grew up in a very nor whatever normal is. Normal is the wrong word, but very healthy family. My parents are still married after however many 50 years. My mom never hit me. I never wondered where my next meal was coming from. I had a roof. I mean, a pretty sheltered, privileged life, if you want to use, let's just say privilege. Um, and it's hard for me working with some of the kids I work with because they've had the complete opposite experience where there've been multiple men or women in and out of their parents' lives, and there's abuse and there's poor health when there is food, and where's my next meal coming from? Where are we going to sleep tonight? That sort of thing. And so I've just been really honest with these kids, and I said, look, it's impossible for me to empathize with you. I cannot empathize with you, but I can sympathize with you, and I can tell you that I'm here when you need to talk. Um, I'm going to call you out when you do something stupid, and sometimes they do, but I'm here, and I'm not gonna go anywhere. I'm not gonna give up on you. And so I think that's a big thing is being, just being real, being authentic with them because as soon as you start bluffing, as soon as you start pretending you're somebody you're not, man, they smell that a mile away. And then you're done with your relationship um with them. So I hope that helps. I think
yeah, yeah.
authenticity is huge.
Where I guess the reason I'm maybe struggling here is I'm just trying to draw the similarities between you and kids and the audience as adults. I can see some I can see some big things, which are persistence, right? Keeping going,
Yep.
right? So you're keeping going with your kids. You're making it 100% clear that you're still going to be there. So
Right.
you're keeping going, and so you're leading, right? So leaders go first. So rather than some people have given up on them, you're not. You're a constant, and you're going to go. So there's a consistency there in showing up. There's a consistency that the listeners to this podcast are showing by the virtue of the fact that they are listening to the podcast. They're still going, and you and me, I'm here for them. I'm here for the listeners. You're here for the kids. You're joining me here, sharing your learnings. You're here for the listeners too. So persistence is a huge thing, and we're already doing it. Right? The listeners are already doing it by virtue of the fact that they're here. So something within them, call it nature, right? For religious people, call it God, maybe, right? But just for let's assume a non-religious audience, their nature is keeping them in the game. Their nature is keeping them in the game, in the belief that they may see something differently. They may see their selves differently, and they may see the world differently, and that will be another step along their learning, healing, and growth journey. You talked about the word growth at the outset. You said you used the word blossom, and used the word growth, and I jumped on the blossom word. Funnily enough, because I actually did a webinar for adoptive parents called Blossom. Um,
Cool.
so
That's cool.
that was a
Yeah.
meeting of mine on that. But there's a lots of space that there was lots of space for me to jump into and talk about that blossom piece. And it's a metaphor that we can extend. Like, we're turning what we're doing with metaphors, we're turning the abstract into the concrete. And when something is concrete, it's a thing, and it's a thing we can grasp. So we use that word understanding, don't we? We use the word understanding, and we use the word grasp. And we use the word grasp because we can grasp an object, we can grasp a metaphor, something that is vague and ethereal and abstract. We can't grasp it. So we turn the abstract into the concrete via a metaphor. And then that metaphor allows us to grasp the object, or our brain to grasp the concept that we're trying to get across. Um, and it led us in. The blossom led us into this weight, and the fact that the kid, the deck is stacked against the kid with the weight of stuff that's gone on for them in the past in their lives. The inconsistency of people in their lives, people not showing up for them, the trauma that they've been through. Um, so now I'm stuck with the next question, right? Let's talk about us as adults. I've got 12 years. I've got 12 years on you at 58. People use the phrase "getting in their own way." Have you heard that? We're getting in our own way, and it seems to me that that implies two, right? There's the one that's trying to get something done, and there's the one that's that's getting in the way. Like it doesn't seem quite to stack up to me. Do you see it? Is it just me? Do you see it?
No, it's not just you. I mean, it's you're your own worst enemy. You're getting in your way. Um, you referenced God. Scripture, the New Testament's clear. The Apostle Paul, very clear about. I don't want to do the things that I do, but I do them anyway, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, getting in your own way. It's human nature. It's all those things. But is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it both? Um, and yeah, I see that with these kids. yeah, getting in your own way. Um,
But isn't trauma getting in the way for a lot of them?
yeah, I think so. Trauma and their just their background. Um, I, I can tell I'll tell you a story real quick. 15-year-old girl that we fostered. Um, Smart, beautiful, great. I mean, she has so much potential. And my wife and I just poured ourselves in to her. And after 3 months of her living with, so I have 4 children, so my wife and my 4 kids, so living with the six of us and our dog and all that. She had a breakdown where she was doing things at school she wasn't supposed to be doing, drugs and whatnot. And um, we had made a concerted effort to just kind of accept her into our family, which included doing all the things that we do, participating in sports, sitting down for meals together as a family, talking about our day, eating the foods that we ate. Um, and frankly, Simon, I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for my wife, but I'll speak for myself. And I'll say I thought we were doing her a favor. Look at us. We've got, we're doing activities and we're together as a family and we're healthy and we're eating healthy and we're spending time together. And when she had this incident at school, I sat down with her and I said, you've been with us 3 months, and this has probably been the happiest 3 months. I think I said, I just made the statement. I said, this has been the best 3 months of your life. I was very confident, Simon, that I had given this to her. And she went, no, no. She kind of looked at me like I had three heads and was like, what are you talking about? And I said, okay, maybe not the happiest, but the healthiest. We fed you. My wife would get up every morning and make smoothies for her. Right? A young lady who never ate breakfast and was tired all the time. And we were trying to, all these good things, physical, the whole family, the whole person. I mean, church and everything. And she's like, healthy. I don't, and okay. And I finally just said, what, we've done a lot for you over 3 months, and you don't have the violence and the unhealthy habits that you had. And she said, okay, but I like those. And I just kind of looked at her like, did you really just say that? And she had told me a story before about she and her mom chasing each other around the front yard, going after fighting, physically fighting, chasing after each other with like pots and pans, trying to beat each other. It's just this image of violence. And she said, and I referenced that, and she said, well, that's normal for me. She said, I like the chaos. And because I said that's chaotic. And she said, I like that. I'm comfortable in that. You and your family sitting around after church on Sunday morning and talking about, this, that, and the other, and how your day went and how church went. And man, this food is, we never did that. I don't even know what that is. And it was almost a disdain for what I valued, and felt like was healthy and important and made people happy. And she just didn't want any part of that. And that was a real eye-opening experience. And I'm not here to judge, anybody. I would argue that it's healthy for a family to get together in the evenings or the afternoons and have a meal together. I think research shows that. I think that these are good things, and certainly not chasing your mother around the front yard with a bat or a pot or pan or whatever. That's a good thing if you're not doing that. But for her, that was normal. That was chaos. And that was comfortable for her. So she wouldn't really even make it feel like it was chaos. It was just comfortable for her. It was what she was used to. And I mean, that was just a really eye-opening conversation for me. Because here I am, holding up this on this pedestal of what I feel like is an absolute of normalcy and appropriateness and health and all that, and she wanted no part of it. And that's trauma. All these things, violence in the home, and not eating healthy meals, and chaos. That's trauma that impacts, and it's just not healthy. But who was I to say that to her? even all the time that we had spent together. She just didn't see it. And she wasn't gonna see it. And so to go back, Simon, kind of back to your smoking reference. It's like, yeah, I guess I know I should stop smoking. It seems to be unhealthy, but man, I like a cigarette every now and then. And it feels normal to me. And so until I have some, major reason, some real significant reason to stop smoking, I'm not going to do it. And I'm afraid for her and kids like her, especially when they reach that, 15, 16, 17-year old, it's where they're comfortable. And it's, it is going to take something significant to get them out of that. I went off on a tangent, Simon. I hope
No, no,
that helps.
I think it's great. I think what we're looking for, you talked about it, that being an eye-opening moment for you. Um, how I guess that's a moment where you realize that your definition of thriving was different to her definition of thriving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and and it unpicked an assumption within you.
Yeah.
I kind of like um, my worldview is more accurate than your worldview.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
my
Right.
perspective is. So, how did that change you?
Wow. That's a really good question. I, the cynical side of me, because unfortunately I've seen it happen time and again, and I've, kept up with her, and, 2.5 years later, she's back at home on drugs. So the cynical side of me just feels like, yeah, she's stuck. It's this cycle.
Yeah,
Um, and that it's easy to get in that because I've seen it happen so many times. But what did it change? What did it change in me? Um, it helped me to see that, and I knew this cognitively, but sometimes you have to experience it. The short window that I had her in my home, in my life, with my family, it was really small, 90 days, 3 months, 90 days. And what had gone on in the 14 years and 9 months before that. Um, and it's so unrealistic to even think that in 90 days I'm going to have the impact that the first 14, over 14 and a half years had. So what does that mean? Does that mean I don't try? Well, that can't be the answer. Um, what does that mean, that I just, give in and say, okay, we're gonna have, while you're here, we're just gonna have chaos. What are you used to? Okay, so you're used to eating, bad food and staying up all night and smoking in your room and, chasing mom around. Okay, let's just do that while you're here. So no, that's not the answer either, obviously. The answer's got to be, Simon, that you just do the best you can while you can with what you have. And it's what we preach, teach, preach, whatever word you want to use, to our foster families. It's like, whatever the length of time is, and we're a faith-based agency, and so, we believe, and I believe this, Simon, that God sends us these children to, for a reason, and they're with us for just a window of time, and during that window, we've got to do the best that we can, and hope that there's a seed planted, hope that there's something that we share, that we give them, that makes a difference, that they'll come back to. And it won't be tomorrow, and it won't be next week. It may be 10 years from now, but we give them something that they'll come back to. And I can evidence that by the number of kids who come back, number of kids who have spent however much time in our program, have come back years later, whether it's to say thank you. And then there's a lot of that, or it's to, man, my electric bill, I can't pay it this month. Brad, can y'all help? Or we've got one a young lady who came back. She had a new baby, needed diapers, needed formula. Where did she go? Well, she came to us. She came to us, and we provided those things for her. And so I just, are you going to make a lasting change that they're going to wake up one morning and go, oh, wow, let me, no, but are you going to plant a seed? Yeah, I think you are. And that's why you got to be real. You got to be authentic. And you've just got to persevere and be persistent. Um, but then also realistic, Simon, because again, with this young lady that I've referenced, you're not going to undo 14 and a half years of trauma in 90 days. You're just not. You're just not.
So fascinating conversation, bro. Fascinating, my friend. You said uh, getting, you talked about getting something cognitively and differentiating getting something cognitively and something that was an experience. Is that, is that right? Do you
But
remember? Yeah.
yeah, book smart versus street smart, I guess. How maybe
Yeah.
that's the way I put it.
I think it's all those different ways of saying the same thing. So that's what I was trying to get at in terms of like a change of mind, a change of heart, or a change of life, right? So that's getting something in the head, getting something in the heart, or getting something in your bones, right? Getting something in our bones, so it becomes our lived experience, right? So that's looking at the degrees of the degrees of the significance of the change that's happened. It's easy to, think that sounds like a good idea. It's harder to uh, follow through with it in practice. It takes a bigger insight. So I distinguish between epiphanettes and epiphanies, right? So an epiphanet is a small epiphany, right? So
Good.
yeah, you like that. I like it. The other thing is that we can't have those for other people. We have to we have to have an epiphanet or an epiphany, a change. We have to have our own epiphany or our own epiphanet. We have to have our own change of head, change of heart, change of lived experience. It's an inside job. And until we have that breakthrough moment, or then there's no change. We have to have, there's no such thing as a second-hand insight. We have to have them for ourselves,
Yeah.
and yet, so what's the world outside doing? It's either helping, it's keeping us stuck, um, or it's creating a space for us to change. And arguably, that's what you're doing. You're creating space for the kids to change, but the change is ultimately up to them.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing on the podcast, right? We're creating a space for people to talk about change. What helps. So the questions are, right. What is thriving? What helps us thrive? And what gets in the way of us thriving? What helps us thrive? We talked about that with the blossom. What gets in the way of thriving? Trauma in this
Yeah.
in this thing, and so yeah, what helps us, like the right environment? What helps? Our trauma gets in our way. That the trauma is a blocker. It's a blocker to us thriving until we have a big enough insight to take us forward to next step. But we have to have it. We have to have that insight for ourselves. Yeah.
So I heard it. I heard a comedian recently, it was this week, talking about he's got a friend who, when they go out to eat, and I don't know how it is in the UK, Simon, so maybe I'm off here, but he's got a friend who's just rude, and they'll go out to eat, and he snaps at the server, hey, and when he brought this up in the stand up bit, you could hear the groan from the audience. They were just like, oh, and so he went on to say, he said, you know what I think. And I can't remember which country he referenced. May have been Israel. I don't know. There's a country he referenced that all citizens, at least male citizens, have, it's basically conscription. You have to serve in the military for some extended, period of time. He said in the United States, they should do the same thing, but you should serve in a restaurant. You should be a server in a restaurant so that you've experienced it. You know what it's like. And of course, his inference was you wouldn't have any of this snapping. You treat your servers better, and I think he's right. Number one, I mean that changed how I see the service industry, but I I think that's that lived experience that you're talking about. What gets in the way um, of thriving? What stops? It's that trauma, but then what can help us as adults in the lives of these young people. If you're like me and you like I said, I can't empathize with these folks, but I've been around it enough to sort of have lived it, to have experienced through their eyes, to see the effect that it can have. Um, and so yeah, your second question, what keeps us from thriving? Well, it's the trauma. Well, then what can help the thriving? Well, it's people in your life who really are seeking to understand, seeking to live your experience with you as best that they can. And so, maybe it's on us to foster, to welcome a child into our home, or to help support a foster family or an adopted family somewhere. And there's any number of ways you can do that, but to live the experience, um, I think that's key. I really do.
Yeah. I think it's not just trauma that gets in the way. Where I was going with the what get, I'm getting in my own way, right? I'm only one person. I can't actually get in my way. I've tried to do this, right? If you so imagine you're walking. We call it a pavement. You call it a sidewalk, right? Imagine yourself walking, or actually do it. Try and do this. Walk down, walk anywhere, but walk down a sidewalk or walk down a pavement and try and get in your own way. You can't actually do it. It's not
Right.
possible. It's
Right.
a metaphor, but the metaphor doesn't stand up to the physical thing, right? It doesn't stand up to physical test because you can't do it. There's only one body. One body can't get in there's nothing to lean. There's nothing to lean the the ladder against. Do you know what I mean? There's just one, and we don't what's getting in our way. Sometimes it's our trauma, sometimes it's our conditioning, right? So I was thinking maybe the person that clicked his fingers at the waiter grew up in a house where that's what his dad did,
Yeah.
right? So it's conditioning or learned behavior. So trauma, conditioning, learned behavior. But what gets in our way along the thriving it isn't ourselves. I think it's a belief, and where I've seen this, where I've seen this before, I didn't believe is where I've seen it for myself, right? So this is my experience, right? So some people, yeah, I didn't believe that I was primarily wounded until I read the book, The Primal Wound. I thought adoption may have messed me up in somehow, but I didn't use those words, and but yet when I read the book, I thought this explains everything, right? Explains everything. And my next belief, right? I I believed I was stuck with it. I believed that I was stuck with it. I believed I couldn't heal. So if somebody asked me at that time, what does healing mean to you, Simon? I would have said, well, I can't heal because I've got this primal wound and I don't believe I can heal. I believe I'm stuck with it, right? And and then about 6 months later, as I was doing some work on myself. I was doing personal development work. I was going to webinars about, I guess, about how our minds work and how our feelings work and who we are underneath all that. And it just came to me one day. Look, who we are, or who I am, is essentially unwoundable. I, so I only believed I was wounded. I only believed that I was stuck with that wound. And then that belief went. That belief went for me. And as I say that, I feel it sounds so easy. And I think one of the reasons was the way that I was brought up. I think, like if you've got if there is such a thing as a primal wound, and it's just a metaphor for it's a metaphor for this mother separation, the separation degree thing. I'm when I said the word just, I thought I'm playing this down, right? So let me put that. So if we're accepting that there's trauma due to relinquishment, um, if we are we're saying that we're definitely saying there is trauma going on sometimes within birth families, right? With before the adoption, and how how the adoptee is parented after after that's happened has a big role. So I feel that I was brought up in a mostly good environment where that helped me along the blossoming route, and that doesn't happen for all adoptees, right?
Right.
It just doesn't happen. So the things multiply: relinquishment trauma and trauma within the adoptive family. They multiply together, right? So one, yeah, if we say that the relinquishment trauma has a score of 5, and we rate a parenting, an experience of being parented from 1 to 10, 5 is the relinquishment trauma plus 1, a great family, fantastic, almost perfect family, gives an overall score of 5. But if we're raised by complete narcissistic, just wrong parents, and so they get a score out of 10. 5 times 10 equals 50, and you end up with a whole load more trauma going on within that person because of the way that they've been raised. So I had a benign experience, and therefore my overall trauma score is low, right? But I go back to that point that the belief that it's the beliefs now as adults that that shape us. If we've looked at this space and we don't believe that we can thrive, maybe we're not listening to the Thriving Adoptees podcast. If we Because we're going to say, well, that's got nothing to do with me. Or if we say, I don't believe I can heal. I can't heal because I don't believe I can. Then maybe it's the belief, putting the belief under the microscope will be the thing that helps us see that. So we might hear the idea as a nice idea in a podcast with Brad and Simon, and then something else happens for us at a later date where we have that epiphany moment, that bingo, got it moment, that aha moment, that breakthrough insight. And that's what takes us along our way.
Good. I think that's right. Uh, yeah, I think that's right. That's good. That aha moment, epiphany or epiphanet. I like that.
Yeah. And so all we can do is we can put ourselves in the way of those epiphanies. We can put ourselves in the path. We can put ourselves in the places. That's probably the better metaphor. We can put ourselves in the places where we're likely to have those epiphany moments. So that might be um, that might be church. You talked about faith, Bill. That might be church. That might be reading books about our essence. That might be listening to podcasts
Yeah.
of so that we can gain a different perspective, right? And I've been using this perspective word for quite a long time. It's a favorite word, but somebody used it. I was listening to something this morning. They used the word angle, and I thought it's really good. So if we can see something from a different perspective, if we can see it from a different angle, right? We're shifting it. We're moving the uh, the rock is in the same place in the backyard or back garden as uh, we would say it, right? But we've moved, and uh, uh, because we've moved, the same rock looks different to us.
So Simon, and I don't know the breadth or the scope of this book. But there's a famous book in the States, To Kill a Mockingbird. Don't know if you're familiar with it or not.
I've heard the name, I've never read it.
So it's a beautiful story, and the book is great, and it's one of those rare occasions where the movie's, almost as good as the book, and some of that has to do with the casting, the actors that are in it. But there's this beautiful scene in To Kill a Mockingbird where you've got the father the in the story, the lawyer, and I can't really get into the whole story, but he's just a really good dad. I mean, just like fantastic. And his little girl, tomboyish, type little girl who's just fantastic. I've got a daughter that's just like her. She gets in a fight at school and she gets in trouble and she comes home and she's upset and it's this beautiful moment, and the movie encapsulates it so well. The book does a great job, but the movie does a great job as well. And this large man, Atticus is his name. Um, he's got his little girl there on the front porch, on their swing, and they're talking about this family and they're how poor they are, and she's trying to make sense of all this, and he stops and he says, Scout, her name is Scout, her nickname Scout, says, you really don't know a man until you get in their shoes and walk around for a little bit, seeing things from their perspective, like with the rock that you just referenced. It's you know looking at it from a different perspective, and I think we're called to do that in these roles. We're called to get in the shoes of these kids that we're working with. What was it like to be in the house they grew up in at 2 and 3 years old? And I so often think about how many times I have a 5-year-old at home. How many times a day do I hug that child? And my wife hugs that child. I've already done it several times just today. And these children who don't grow up in families like this, the children that we're working with that are suffering through this trauma, have they ever been really held like that? And and again, I'm not trying to put myself up on a pedestal. I'm just saying that these kids, they don't have these experiences, and you have stuff that's withheld from them, the physical affection, but then you have the trauma that's put on top of that. Can we walk around in their shoes to really try to understand? Again, it's empathy,
Yeah.
and I've said this twice now. I can't empathize with these kids, but I can try my best to try to imagine what it's like to be them. And as Atticus said, and To Kill a Mockingbird, to walk around in their shoes. And Jesus says this to treat others the way that we would want them to be treated. I mean, you know, so profound. And if we would just do that, that's authentic, that's persistent, that's helping people to thrive. When we do that, when we try to treat them the way they want to be treated and see things from their perspective, maybe that's the key. Maybe we've solved all the problems here today, is and it's summed up simply: just treat people right, and try to look at things from their perspective. Maybe it is that simple. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it is.
Doing the right thing sounds sounds easy to do, but it in the piece of a conversation like this, uh, the word that pops into my head is grace for ourselves,
Yeah, yeah,
because in the heat of the moment, uh, our trauma can show through, our conditioning come through, our childhood come to, a childhood experience can come through. Um, I've been thinking a lot about this recently in terms of how how we can how we can help adoptive parents to a clearer experience, how we can raise their empathy, given that they haven't walked in our shoes. And I was thinking about the the personal, the kind of like a parallel personal experience, right? So you're the first person I've had a chance to ask this, and I know we're running out of time. Were you ever bullied as a kid?
oh sure, sure.
Emotionally bullied as well, and physical bullied both, or
Yeah, more physically bullied. I was kind of a, we say, late bloomer, so to speak, growing up, and all that. And so yeah,
yeah,
yeah, small when I was in middle school. Middle school's tough on kids.
yeah,
I've got two that have come out of it.
going through that, yeah, come out
It's
of it,
pretty
yeah.
rough. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah.
So if you do you remember how you felt when you were bullied emotionally, or how you felt about how you felt about yourself?
Yeah, not good. I mean, insignificant, not liked, not accepted, um, especially by my peers, and yeah, all those things.
So if you take that and just and dial it up,
Yeah.
like there is no one primal wound. Some people's wounds are very big, some people's wounds are very small, right? So at one end you've got a shark attack, and at the other end you've got a paper cut, right? So but insignificant. You said insignificant and not accepted, right? So we're in the right space. It's just it's dialing dialing that up, a more profound, a more emotionally disturbing. But just imagine that a bigger experience for more of your day, and that's what it's about. So my bullying experience. Well, I got bullied a lot. I didn't get a lot of physical bullying, but I had some bullying on scout camp. So I was 11. I was the smallest kid in the tent. The biggest kid is in charge is the 14-year-old patrol leader guy. I don't know what we call him in the States. But after I messed up, and I wish I messed up quite a lot as boy on scout camp, he made me kneel on the ground and say, I am a stupid, worthless piece of effing S, right? And that's what I had to repeat often. And then I realized like 40 years later, that must have been how his dad treated him,
Sure. Yeah.
or how, how somebody else had he treated him in scout camp, maybe, you know. So it's that feeling of worthlessness and wrongness. I've heard it summed up as existential wrongness. That's what it that's what it that's what it feels like, and so there's a feeling, uh, and and also a belief that there's something wrong with us, which
Yeah.
is why the Thriving Adoptees logo is a diamond. Right? It's the direct counter to the worthless piece of garbage. But grace, going back to the point, grace for ourselves when we don't see our diamondness. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
grace
Okay.
for ourselves when it's so.
That's good. Good stuff,
Any,
son. It's good.
anything else you'd like to share before we bring it in, Brad?
Well, I think you asked about the bullying and stuff like that, and again for me, the feelings I felt of being and being not accepted by my peers and insignificant. That wasn't at home. That was just at school. And so to your point, if it was that significant for me at that age, and that was just at school, I mean, I came home and my parents accepted me. I was very important in my parents'
Yeah,
life in our family. And so you take what I experienced just among my peers, and you dial it up to use your term at home. I mean, it's much worse. If it was my family that
yeah,
had made me feel that way, man, that is hard, hard, hard to
yeah,
recover from. Um,
yeah. And I've heard that from adoptees that they weren't accepted. They were um, they didn't live up to their parents' expectations,
all right, all right,
and therefore they were not accepted. Their behavior or their intellect or their feelings or whatever it was, or the whole thing. No, they didn't feel accepted by them. So that's why I think that the trauma to do with relinquishment. There's trauma in relinquishment, and then there's trauma in within our families, and they combine. It's a
yeah,
multiplying force because they only it's all, but it's all contained in one person, right? Yeah.
yep.
Thanks, Brad,
Hey,
and
Simon, thank you.
thanks, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.